Thanks to the Africa Center for Strategic Studies for inviting me, and thanks to all of you for giving up your morning to think together with us regarding the future of South Sudan. Since the roundtable is designed to help us think about what the future holds for South Sudan, I think looking forward requires a little bit of reflection on the past. So I'll make a few remarks on how we got here, and then suggest a few steps that we can take to move forward. What happened in South Sudan in December of 2013 was shocking by all accounts, but not surprising to a lot of people who have been watching South Sudan since CPA and referendum and independence. It was very visibly in the making for the last 8 or 9 years. Many wounds of the liberation wars were left untreated, and this was one of the promises of independence, that those wounds would be tackled and mended. For example, 1991 split in the SPLA when Dr. Riek Machar, the former vice president, who is now the leader of the ongoing rebellion, split from the SPLA, and the SPLA became involved in numerous and very extremely violent episodes of confrontations among themselves as well as between the civilians and the Liberation Army. What it left behind is gaping wounds in the hearts and minds of South Sudanese, something that would have needed to be tackled soon after the independence came. Many episodes of violence between ethnic communities have been going on and intensified, in fact, after the CPA and after independence. The need for reconciliation between these communities and to mend those rifts that were thus created was evident all through, but this was not done. The military itself, the SPLA, the country's National Defense Force, is the biggest institution in South Sudan. And it is the most expensive institution to run. It estimates range anywhere between 45 and 60% of the national expenditure goes to this institution. But it is also the most dysfunctional of institutions, to the extent that many South Sudanese will say that the SPLA, the security force of the nation, has been at times the source of insecurity. The SPLM, the ruling party, the nation's biggest party, actually has rendered South Sudan a one-party system. But it has remained unwilling or unable to transform itself into a democratic party with many contentious issues among the leadership within that party. The largest part of population of South Sudan was excluded from the gains of independence, especially the young people, because of the unwillingness of the political party to be the people's party that it espouses, that it claims itself to be. 73% of South Sudan's population is below the age of 30, according to 2008 census. 40% between the age of 14 and 30. And if you exclude all of these people from the gains of independence, as has been evident in South Sudan, I don't know what sort of society you want to build. Then continued violence after the CPA and intensification of it further after independence in the form of cattle theft, revenge due to lack of justice, and rebellions from the SPLA continued all through the period of relative peace since the CPA. And attracting all the excluded young people from the gains of independence. When you have 14-year-old up to 30 years having no investment in themselves and having very little to hope for or to live for, in a situation where there is a militarized community, there is really no way to expect these people to just live without that kind of hope and things to invest in themselves. That exclusion is not just abstract thing. It's not born of the high expectations and assumed capacity of the state and the willingness of leaders to take up the responsibility for welfare. It is not an assumption. It is, the divide is real. It's visible everywhere. With South Sudan having so quickly become a deeply divided class society, leaving so many people with very little investment in their lives. And it is visible everywhere. In the rural areas, the absence of services is heartbreaking in certain situations. But the lavish expenditure in state capitals and in Juba is quite visible. So it is not some form of abstract, disappointed population assuming that the leaders are corrupt or it is something that they see every day. All of this was bound to cause an explosion. It was just a matter of time. What we didn't know with certainty was what shape this explosion was going to take. A popular uprising resembling the North African protests, perhaps, or more rebellions by army commanders, and certainly there have been many of those, or intensity in the more familiar tribal militia wars, or more civil contest of power within the SPLM leadership. We didn't know what form it was going to take. It could have been either any one of those or a combination of this. But that was only a matter of time before it blows up. But its capacity to bring the country to the brink of shattering the way it did depended on how the government was going to react and manage this explosion. What it did, no matter what you call it, a coup attempt, a revolt, a mutiny, or early signs of a civil war, it was poorly managed. On December 6th, when a group of SPLM leaders held a press conference in which they criticized the government and the president for what they call dictatorial tendencies, they made a lot of good points about what the party should have done or should be doing to govern the country. But instead of responding in a manner of dialogue, since they are all members of the same party, the vice president issued a letter in which he described these people as a bunch of disgruntled leaders who have lost office And that was the reason why they were talking, is because they lost office, not because of genuine problems within the ruling party, issues to do with democracy within the party, issues to do with the corruption that people have been talking about for years, having placed South Sudan among the most corrupt countries in the world, according to various reports. Transparency International, for example, ranks South Sudan the fourth most corrupt country in the world. And when these issues were raised, because corruption is something that is very difficult to size it, but to be discussed within the party is extremely crucial. And so to dismiss it as a case of people who are disgruntled because they have been fired back in July of 2013 was where the whole thing began to fall apart. The president also gave an address at the National Liberation Council. Just 2 days, the meeting began 2 days before the 15th of December, when the whole thing blew up in our faces. And in that address, he reminded South Sudanese of such incidences as Vice President's history with 1991 split. And many people think that this was the wrong time to bring up such wounds. And perhaps that is what that is a sign of another case of mismanagement of the confrontation within the political party. But this, the army, looking forward, how do we know how we got here, but how do we get the country out of this mess? We have to look at some of the institutions of government. The army has collapsed, there's no question about it. And as we speak, many defections are still happening in Upper Nile. The army was put together haphazardly. It's made up of SPLA proper. It's made up of militias that used to fight the SPLA during the Liberation War. It's made up of people who used to be members of Sudan Armed Forces. And the result is that is a huge, unwieldy institution that is expensive to run and difficult to manage, with no clear chains of command, with no shared culture within the force. The members of the force don't have one particular ethos that they subscribe to. And the result of all this history is that many people kept breaking away. And the president the government has done something that is commendable over the years, and that is to seek reconciliation with all the militia leaders and absorb all of them into the army, which is what has made the army so huge. But the result is that you ended up with an army that is made up of up to 50-60% one ethnic group that did not reflect the ethnic diversity of the country. And this army cannot anymore become the national institution with the agenda of social cohesion anymore, if it remains the way it is today. A much deeper and broader reconciliation between the communities, a reconciliation process that everyone will buy into, not the current process where Archbishop of the Episcopal Church of Sudan, Daniel Dengbul, is the leader of, and Faride Taban, the Emeritus Bishop of the Catholic Church of Sudan, is deputy There's nothing wrong with having church leaders lead a reconciliation, but we have to look at the personalities and the histories of ethnic relations in South Sudan, where Daniel Dengbul comes from an ethnic group that is accused by all other ethnic groups for all sorts of issues. And to lead it, you need somebody who is more acceptable to everyone. And as one person told us when we were, the Sudd Institute was investigating the possibility of doing a much more comprehensive reconciliation process, and one person told us that the problems of South Sudan cannot be prayed away. And so a look at a more comprehensive reconciliation process that everybody will buy into is out of the question. And then accountability, which is critical for reconciliation. To succeed, you must have the impunity of the past has to stop, because it is that impunity that has become one of the big reasons for the current revenge and counter-revenge that is going on currently in South Sudan. But these would need to be built into whatever political settlement that will emerge from Addis, if they were to be made with commitment, financial commitments, political commitments, if they were to be processes that every leader, every South Sudanese is committed to, they have to be part of the settlement that will come from Addis, which, as the ambassador just said, cannot be a simple return to the status quo, but a comprehensive one that renews the promises that independence had represented to the people of South Sudan. I think I'll end it there, and thank you for listening.